should say that America is a multi-partisan issue, because there is the basic understanding that in times of need, it's the United States that we can trust. I remember that when I was a girl, and we all went to my neighbor because we didn't have a television and they had. And we all watched Apollo and Neil Armstrong making first step on the moon, saying that this is one small step for man, but giant leap for mankind. And I understood that day that the sky is not the limit anymore, and that America represents mankind. So I'm not an American, but I'm part of this. I was in the Prime Minister's office. Ariel Sharon was the Prime Minister. He was in a meeting, and I was just walking, and I saw the first attack. And it took me some time to understand what's going on, because at first I thought that it's an accident or something. And then I remember the shock of understanding that this is a terror attack. I felt that Manhattan that day was like Tel Aviv for us. We were all united that something is happening to us. And I think that this is the basic understanding also today in Israel, that we are all together, sharing the same values, but also having the understanding that we need to fight for our own values against those that cannot accept these values.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome former AIPAC President Lonnie Kaplan.
From the first day Rick Santorum took a seat in Congress in 1991, he has demonstrated his foreign policy credentials and leadership on tough issues. During his time in Washington, he co-sponsored 11 pieces of legislation that either imposed sanctions or raised concerns about the activities of Syria, Iran, and the Palestinians. In 2003, he was the lead co-sponsor on legislation that imposed suffocating sanctions on Assad and Damascus. In 2005, the senator was a key backer of the Iran Freedom and Support Act. And in 2006, he co-sponsored the Palestinian Anti-Terror Act. Through his strong support of foreign aid, he always stood by Israel and ensured that it had the means to protect itself. His foresight, Middle East acumen, and willingness to tackle the tough challenges to keep America and Israel safe and secure showcase his deep personal commitment to the issues that matter most to those of us in this room. I'm honored to call Rick Santorum my friend and to welcome him back to the AIPAC Policy Conference. Ladies and gentlemen, Republican candidate for President, Rick Santorum.
Thank you very much, Lonnie. I appreciate the opportunity to be here again with my friends here at AIPAC. Although this is, thank you. As you may know, this is a somewhat important day in my life today. We have a whole lot of primaries going on all across the nation, 10 of them. But I wanted to come off the campaign trail to come here because one of the reasons that I decided to run for president is because of the grave concern I have about the security of our country and the leadership of our country in the face of an existential threat to not just the state of Israel. And I think that's where a lot of the rhetoric is oriented to when we talk about the revolutionary Islamic Republic of Iran, but an existential threat to freedom-loving people throughout the world, which is what Iran is. I have been focused on the issue of a nuclear Iran for a long time. In my last campaign back in 2006, I would travel around my state and I would say, how many people have ever heard of the name Mahmoud Ahmadinejad? And no one would know. And I would always say, just wait. In a year, you'll not only know the name, you'll be able to pronounce it. I was the author at that time, as Lonnie mentioned, the Iran Freedom Support Act. And I fought President Bush, Secretary Rice, in making the claim that Iran, in fact, was developing a nuclear weapon at the time. They needed to have sanctions put in place, and we needed to have an effort on the part of the United States to engage the Iranian people who are being oppressed by this brutal regime in Tehran, and that we needed to have the United States on the side of the Iranian people to overthrow this theocracy that runs the government of Iran. I fought to have this bill passed. And I was opposed, not just by President Bush, but it was filibustered on the floor by none other than Joe Biden. And it was eventually voted down with the opposition of our president, who was then in the Senate. Eventually, a weaker version of that bill eventually passed at the end of that year. But nothing was really done to confront Iran and their quest for a nuclear weapon, or to do the important role of working with people in the streets of Iran. Something that I really believed in and thought that America could play such a key role as we had in other revolutions and against dictators and despots. Iran continued on its mission, not just developing nuclear weapons, but killing American troops openly, providing IEDs that have maimed and killed more Americans than any other country in the world, planning terrorist attacks, conducting terrorist attacks, supporting radical Islamist groups. All the while, the United States sat on the sidelines and did nothing, or slow-walked what was necessary to stop this regime from spreading terror and doing something even worse, developing a nuclear weapon which would provide the ultimate shield for the propagation of terror, potentially weapons of mass destruction through terrorist organizations, as well as we've seen the overhyped and overheightened rhetoric about the destruction of the State of Israel. As I've sat and watched this play out on the world stage, I've seen a president who has been reticent. He says he has Israel's back. From everything I've seen from the conduct of this administration, he has turned his back on the people of Israel. We now have an announcement today that the administration has agreed to open talks with the Iranian government. That is in spite of UN resolutions that says they must stop the processing of their nuclear fuel in order to get those negotiations. Another appeasement, another delay, another opportunity for them to go forward while we talk. Ladies and gentlemen, listening to the Prime Minister's speech last night, and then listening to the President's, there is a clear and unfortunate, tragic disconnect between how the leaders of the country of Israel and the country of the United States view the exigency of this situation. Prime Minister Netanyahu was very clear. Israel is not at peace with what's going on in Iran and the process that is moving forward there. There is a concern, obvious concern, about what this administration is doing or not doing to bring this issue to a head before that final line is crossed and it is too late. That's why I believe that we need to do more than just talk. We need to set forth a clear ultimatum to the Iranian government. We need to say to the Iranian government, the time is now. You will stop your nuclear production now. You will open up your facilities for inspectors from the United States and other countries so we can certify that those efforts are stopping and being dismantled now. Any further delay from action now simply encourages the Iranian regime to take America, well, what they've done and taken America over the past several years, which is not serious about stopping them from their quest for a nuclear weapon. The fact that we had the chairman of the Joint Chiefs suggesting that we're not sure yet that Iran is really going to pursue or has made the decision to develop a nuclear weapon just shows, again, the disconnect that they know we have, the insincerity of our leaders in telling the truth to the American public about what is actually going on in Iran today, how radical this regime is, the hyper-rhetoric about not just the state of Israel, but targeting Jews in specific. Let's be honest with the American public about who these radical Islamists are who are running the government of Iran and what their intention is. Their intention is not just to control the Middle East. Their intention is not just to protect themselves from being attacked. These are radical theocrats who don't just want to destroy the state of Israel. These are radical theocrats who believe it is their destiny to not just conquer and destroy those in their ways in the Middle East, but far beyond that. These are the folks who have been very clear about what their intent. And the idea that they won't, if they do get a nuclear weapon, that they won't use it because, well, they're rational actors, as General Dempsey said. What leads you to believe that these folks are rational actors? Rational actors don't call for the destruction of other states, call them cancers. Preach radical theologies. Rational actors don't send 100,000 children as minesweepers during the Iran-Iraq War. Rational actors do not develop nuclear capability, call it for nuclear power, when they have hundreds of years of oil and gas to provide for their power and their medical research. These are essentially irrational actors. We need to put that ultimatum in place. And then we need to be prepared, if that ultimatum is not met, to engage Prime Minister Netanyahu and the people of Israel in an effort to make sure that if they do not tear down those facilities, we will tear down them ourselves. This is not bellicosity and warmongering. This is preventing the most radical regime in the world from having a weapon that could fundamentally change the security posture, not just of the Middle East, but as we've seen with planned attacks here in the United States. A nuclear Iran with a nuclear shield to project terror around the world is a nightmare for all freedom-loving people in the world. Under a Santorum administration, we would find no gap between Israel and the United States because our interests are united in stopping the world from having a radical terrorist organization, which happens to be governing the state of Iran, from having a weapon that will destroy the opportunity for peace and prosperity for the world. My final point I would make to you is this. We see energy prices going up, and it's obviously caused in part by the tensions in the Middle East. I would encourage everyone here to begin to work with us to make sure that the radical environmental movement in this country does not stop the production of oil and gas in this country and pipelines that need to be built so we can become energy independent and not rely on the Middle East and bad actors for the supply of oil and gas for the world. Thank you all very much. God bless AIPAC. God bless America. Thank you.